I'm great, guys. How are you doing?
We're doing all right. Interesting times again. I mean, always drama with this franchise. So, what do you think? What do you think is going to be different? I guess I'll start with that. With Thomas Brown now at the helm of all things Bears for the rest of the season.
Well, the schedule's different for starters, and I know that's kind of a small thing in the grand scheme of things, but it's just showing that, a new head coach comes in, the energy gets shifted in the building, starting from the schedule and the way that the day is structured out here to what you see on Sundays. And I'm curious to see just how the McVay influence, because that's where he spent most of his time in the NFL once he left college football. How much of that McVay influence, just from the way that he operates on a daily basis, Thomas Brown carries over? And you might not be able to really tell in 5 weeks, but I think there's enough time to make some pretty tangible changes just to the structure and the operation of this team. Because for so long we had heard about practices, which we were under the impression that practices were really hard here, that guys were getting pushed, maybe even too much at times. And then this season, it's, we want to be coached harder. We want mistakes to be corrected during practice. I'm wondering how that stuff changes on a daily basis for how guys feel they're being prepared Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for game week. And, it's the energy shift is different. Obviously, there's a pep in everybody's step when there's a clean slate and a change like this. So we'll see if it, there's really no better opponent for them to face coming off the major change that they made at the head coaching position than San Francisco, a team that is A, injured, B, not playing good football. And we know how close the Bears have been. This could end up working in their favor, that everything that they made change-wise is enough to help them go get a win on the road.
Yeah, we'll get to a little bit more of that in a second because I think it's possible. In terms of how this also might look and feel different now that there's added responsibilities for Thomas Brown, I do wonder how it affects the quarterback negatively or positively. Look, relatively speaking, they were getting into somewhat of a groove offensively, Courtney. They went from 4.34 yards per game under Shane Waldron to 5.4 yards per play, to 5.45 yards per play under Thomas Brown. That's 20%. That's not totally insignificant. They were obviously doing and looking better offensively. Can we expect that to continue? I mean, we hope it does, but there are added responsibilities now for Thomas Brown outside of just making sure he's getting the most out of Caleb and the offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's no reason for it to not continue, especially on offense, right? Communication-wise, he's now going to be down on the field with Caleb Williams. In theory, that should be better communication because you're right there. You can talk to him in between series, and yes, he's got to be the head coach and he's got to, have his hand over the entire team. But he said himself, he's not a micromanager. You can't afford to be if you're Thomas Brown with 5 games left. Let Eric Washington, when the defense is up, let Eric Washington handle that. And from what Thomas has told us, that's kind of his approach he's going to take. I don't want to call it metal, but you can't be everywhere all at once, even if this was starting out week 1. So learning where your strengths are, learning how to be a support, but also how to stay out of the way, I think is a big part of this. So with the offense, if you want, if they want to maintain this thing going forward, he's got to take, not switch up too much there because it was working. For 3 games with him as a sample size, we saw it. We saw the yards per drop back go up. We saw the completion percentage go up. We saw Caleb's total QBR go up. Yeah. All of those things matter, and keeping that part consistent, I think, is the way that you'll be able to determine what success looks like over these next 5 weeks. It may not be showing up in 5 straight wins or even 3-2 by the time the win-loss record is decided at the end of week 18, but maybe it doesn't even need to. You got to be able to tell tangible growth and still see the tangible growth between now and the end of the season for Caleb Williams to know that this was the right move at this point of the season to make sure that his rookie progression could continue.
Who does he trust to see what he sees up in the booth?
I think that's going to be Chris Beatty now because he's the offensive coordinator. He's not calling plays, but and here's the thing with him and Thomas Brown, those two go way back. They coached together at Wisconsin in 2014. That was the year that they won the Big Ten. Melvin Gordon had that incredible year. Both of them were on staff. So they have worked together for a really long time. And I think for Thomas to be able to tab Chris Beatty, someone he trusts, someone who he's got a relationship with, to be his eyes and ears for what he can't see from up in the booth. That's not happenstance. Like, he did that on purpose to make him the OC. So I think that's going to be, that's the insulation that he feels he needs to be able to do what he's got to do on the field now that his perspective is changing with Caleb down there. So he has somebody who can relay to him what's going on, what he might not have picked up on the sideline, because he's never called plays from the sideline before. He's seen people do it. It's just going to be a situation where he's going to have to get comfortable in that groove.
How important is Darnell Wright's availability going to be if they're going to pull off an upset this weekend?
Shoot, that's, lost in all of this was the fact that the starting right tackle got carted off to the locker room last week. Yeah. It has been 6 days, and we have not heard anything on Darnell Wright, whether he, how serious the injury was, if he's going to be available this week. Getting carted off is not a small thing.
Right.
And I remember watching it happen, but there's so much other stuff. So, yeah, it is important because, Larry Borum gave up that sack. Like, that was not on Caleb. So anybody out here saying, oh, Caleb takes untimely sacks, like, yes, but also do not include that one because that's not fair. That was a free rusher, and it was supposed to be a draw play, and Larry Borum thought they were doing something else. So I think it's incredibly important because Darnell Wright was playing really well up until that point. And, with the amount of offensive line combinations, I think they're up to 13, having used 13 different ones this season, which is the second most in the NFL. Like, they've got to find some sort of consistency there, and they've been searching for it. But if you lose your starting right tackle, that's not good.
Any coaches that you would say, forget about it, that's not going to happen as they start on this journey to find a new head coach?
I don't think Belichick's realistic.
I don't either, Courtney.
I think for a number of different reasons. And it doesn't, he's going to be really expensive. B, it's going to take him a year or two, if not longer, to install the culture he wants here of his way of doing things. It's not just that you have a talented team and he comes in and he coaches that talented team. He's done things a certain way. A zebra does not change its stripes at 70-plus years old. He's not going just to acquiesce to, well, Ryan Poles is the general manager. Kevin Warren already said he's staying. He's got the say over the roster. Like, I'm just coming in to coach. That's not Bill Belichick. And, yeah, I'm sure he does want another opportunity, and maybe he'll get one. But I don't think it would work here. I don't think you saw how the press conference went on Monday about the power dynamics there. Do you think you're going to bring in Bill Belichick to shake, to rock that boat? I think that would be too much. I think you'd have too many cooks in the kitchen, and that would be, for a team that's trying to move in the right direction. Yes, leader of men, all these things they talk about, stability, being able to deal with, a tough media market. I think you just would be adding too much of a circus to something that needs kind of to be, tamped down a little bit with somebody who has a clear message, a clear direction, and somebody who's going to be around a while. Like, I don't know how many more years Belichick's going to coach if he does indeed get back into coaching. I just don't think you can think what you want about all the Patriot years, whatever. We saw what the last couple of years were like when the wheels were falling off. I do not think it would be a wise choice for them to interview him or to hire him.
I'm with you on that. And I think Vrabel's probably destined for Vegas if Vegas makes a change. And I think they will because of Brady's connection out there. So it's probably another one I'd cross off the list. I'd be interested if I were the Bears, more interested than Belichick, but I'd probably cross it off the list. Do you think it'll be a first-time head coach?
I think they want somebody with experience, but you can't, if Ben Johnson really is the real deal, then it would be difficult to, say, well, he doesn't have the experience of being a head coach. Yep. I get why there would be that course correct because Matt Eberflus didn't have that, and they want somebody that's proven, but I just don't see, if you, throw Cliff Kingsbury into the mix. You'd have to have more of a support system around him. Cliff did not, the years in Arizona were not great. That would not lead you to be oh, sign me up for this because just because he checks the box of having already done it. I don't think that's fair. Now, as an offensive-minded head coach, and you could maybe bring in a big name at defensive coordinator, that might be a better sell. But I don't think it has to be somebody who's done this before. I think they would prefer that. But their best candidate might be somebody in Detroit right now who isn't. Doesn't have that experience as a first-time head coach.
9 of the 14 playoff teams right now are coached by first-time head coaches. 9 of the 14. So I wouldn't.
Experience matters, but more than anything, it's conviction.
Yep.
Like, throwing Thomas Brown's name in there too. Like, he's somebody they're going to consider. I mean, unless they fall off a cliff here, the final 5 games, like worse than they already are, which they wouldn't have tabbed him. They wouldn't have given more responsibility to him. That's not like, think about how Ryan Poles came up under Scott Pioli, and like this was his decision ultimately to fire Matt Eberflus to tab Thomas Brown as the offensive coordinator. He came up under Scott Pioli in Kansas City, and you can look this up. I wrote a feature on this 2 years ago. Like, Scott Pioli's way of telling you did a great job was to throw more onto your plate. That's very clearly what they're doing here, because that's the learned mentality that Poles learned as a young scout coming up. That's what they're doing with Thomas Brown. So I think that's why he's very much, I reported this yesterday, very much a realistic candidate at the end of this, because they wouldn't have put him in this position if they didn't think he'd be able to handle it. And they're also not viewing these next 5 games as an audition, so to speak, because they know it's an unfair spot for him to be in. It's not his offense. He's taking, you got 5 games left. They don't want to view it as like, you got to prove something in these 5 games or you won't get an interview. That's just not a fair set of circumstances to judge how good or bad somebody would be.
Are you ready for your Hoosiers to potentially go to Georgia to play the Bulldogs?
I'm really excited, and I am a little bummed that there's no Big Ten championship game in my future this weekend. It would have been a little tough to pull off the San Francisco trip, but I'm pumped. Like, I'm glad that the committee, like the 3-loss Alabama thing, I said this on Around the Horn yesterday, like it's just how they operate. And the 12th team in the playoffs always going to be flawed. Yeah. It's just like the NCAA tournament when like the 59th team gets in. You're looking at their resume like, they were 16-14 in conference play. Do they really deserve to be here because they won the A-10? It's a flawed system. It's an imperfect system, but at least with Indiana and teams that have one loss that may not have the strongest strength of schedule, even though we can go down that path with several other teams that fall into that category, I'm still very proud of my alma mater, and I'm excited for the college football playoff game that they will be playing either 20th or 21st. I'm looking forward to it.
Courtney, thanks. Safe travels this weekend. We'll talk to you next week.